Afternoon to our first talk about lawyer well-being, and we're following the themes that we follow every year that comes from the Institute of Well-Being in the Law. And Monday is physical well-being. And I have the honor of participating in these talks. This is my second year. Last year, I also took care of the physical well-being portion, and I think that this year we have a very interesting angle that would like to approach physical well-being. I would like to start with introducing myself, and then our panelists will get to introduce themselves as well. My name is Defne Ekin. I am the team clinician for New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program. And today I have with me attorneys Maisel and Benita Talati, and I will have them do their introductions. But thank you for joining us in this conversation, delving into the importance of physical well-being for lawyers. And we hope that our panel-style discussion will be focusing on the unique challenges of incorporating physical activity into your busy schedules. So how about we start with introductions from Benita and then have Matt introduce himself, and then we'll get to the material.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Benita Talati. I am an attorney licensed practice in New Jersey as well as DC. I'm an attorney who lives with chronic illness and chronic pain, which can definitely make physical well-being very challenging. And I'm looking forward to being part of this conversation.
Thank you, Matt.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Maisel. Most recently, I was general counsel for a real estate management company just outside of Camden, New Jersey. Before that, I was an attorney at several law firms in Central and South Jersey, mainly focused on commercial litigation. My fitness journey began in earnest in 2011. I was treated for sleep apnea. The next year, in 2012, I lost about 80 pounds with the help of a commercial weight loss program, some changes in my diet, and aiming to walk 10,000 steps a day. In the spring of 2017, I started running. I'd never run before, and it gradually kind of escalated over the course of a few years. And then finally, last year, I completed the 2023 Philadelphia Marathon. Dr. Ekin, thanks for having me today, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So when I was getting ready for this talk, I figured it's always a good practice to start with how are we defining physical activity to begin with? Because obviously physical well-being isn't only about physical activity. There are many other variables that in fact affect physical well-being, such as sleep, nutrition, hydration. But today our focus is largely on physical activity and the way those other factors obviously get affected by it. So, we'll definitely hear from our speakers in terms of how they might have changed their nutrition or how their sleep changed once they became more physically active. But our primary focus is physical activity. So I figured, okay, let's go with making sure to define it. So I turned to the World Health Organization, and this wasn't a surprise to me, but it's always hard to see that number in front of you. Apparently, according to the World Health Organization, over 1/4 of adults across the globe are not anywhere near meeting physical activity guidelines. That being said, physical activity, according to them, is any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that requires energy expenditure. It can be during leisure time or transport to get to and from places, or as part of a person's work. So it's not really this separate from your work or day-to-day housekeeping chores or running after your children, but it can be any movement that requires energy expenditure. So when you think about that definition, the fact that over 1/4 of adults across the globe are not meeting those guidelines becomes even scarier. So then I thought, okay, so do they have really high numbers that they're recommending? And it's really about, for adults, it comes out to about 21 to 43 minutes a day that they're recommending. Or, if you wanted to have vigorous physical activity, their recommendation is about 11 to 20 minutes a day. So if you're doing 11 minutes of vigorous activity, whether it's like, walking your laundry basket down to the basement, and that takes 10 minutes and it's pretty vigorous. I know because I wear a tracker, and it seems like those kind of things might be more vigorous activity according to my tracker than some of the things that I actually think of as exercise. So it's really not that high of a mark. So 10 to 20 minutes is vigorous activity. If it's like moderate to slow activity, it's 20 to 40 minutes. So I figured, okay, so we know that lawyers aren't doing well in that department. And we do have a pretty sedentary population that in the field. So to have benefits of cardiovascular health, strengthening muscles, bones, flexibility, balance, all of those things are quality of life matters because they help in preventing chronic conditions such as diabetes, arthritis, hearts. It can manage symptoms of pain, fatigue. It can help depression. It can improve cognitive function. So all the more reason for us to be talking about what needs to change, right? So in a nutshell, I'm not going to keep this part long. I sort of continued along my okay, so how is, the World Health Organization defining it, and what are the recommendations they make? So the first recommendation, not very surprising, is the world has to change a bit to be more friendly to physical activity, which they call as the sort of Maisel level changes. The macro level changes. And the Maisel level changes are like, if organizations had more opportunities for people to exercise while they're at work, or if the transportation systems were set up in a way that allowed people to have more bike lanes and therefore have it easier to bike to work, that sort of thing. But really, what our focus today is, what are some of the micro level interventions that some attorneys that I have met, and thank you, Matt, and Benita for volunteering to be on this panel, some interventions that you have made in your lives to make it possible to bring more physical activity into your lives so that you promote your own physical well-being and take an active role in every other aspect of your lives, right? So I hope that as we discuss some of the aspects of these micro level personal changes, all of our attendees also hopefully will think about these questions for yourselves, or maybe even jot down, okay, I need to think about different aspects of how to bring physical activity in terms of your life. We know that the one-size-fits-all approach to physical fitness fails to recognize that people have diverse fitness paths, especially legal professionals. Everybody has distinct abilities, constraints, and preferences. So it's essential for us to move away from an idealized perspective of physical activity and fitness, which might be someone who goes to a gym regularly. And instead, we have to think about inclusivity, acknowledging the wide array of fitness preferences and activities within the large legal community, so that that kind of a mindset could promote an atmosphere of acceptance and mutual respect, empowering individuals to prioritize however they feel they can bring physical activity into their lives. So that's really all I want to say, hoping that our discussion will help everyone think about practical strategies for adjusting your lives to accommodate whether it's time limitations or physical limitations or challenges with motivation, and so that you can be a little bit more optimal in terms of reaping the benefits of physical activity for your overall well-being. All right. So we're just going to do a quick check of attendees. So it's wonderful to see 16 attendees present. And since this is also being recorded, we hope that the message gets relayed to many more. But without further ado, I sort of divided into this talk into several sections. One was, can we start talking about the barriers? What are some of the barriers to physical activity? And what are some of the strategies that you have come up with to overcome these? So I'm going to start with what I think most people at least initially volunteer as. This is one reason that's hard for me to exercise, which is time. So I'll start with Benita. So Benita, how do you deal with the time dilemma? Where does this fit in? Of course, you're not just working, you have all kinds of other aspects of your life that you're attending to. So how do you make time for physical activity?
Sure. So let me first say, after Matt's wonderful introduction, to clarify a few things. I mentioned that I have chronic illness. It's May, it's Awareness Month, so I might as well just throw it out there and say that what I have is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder caused by defective collagen. It can cause widespread joint pain. It can wreak serious havoc on the body. It can create so many comorbidities, ranging from neurological to vision issues, dental issues, hearing, uncomfortable, unpleasant GI issues, women's health issues. It just runs the gamut. And it is very challenging because it's very unpredictable. Case in point, today I'm actually in flare, and I finally gave up and said, well, I guess I must have walked a little too much in the morning. So I'm just going to grab my heating pad. So I've been sitting all the last hour or so with my heating pad and trying to smile through this presentation as well as work. That being said, to answer your question, as you know, I'm a big fan of morning routines. I came across a book, which I part of the book launch team back in the fall of 2023 for a book called Miracle Morning. The updated expanded edition is now available by Hal Elrod. He talks about this 6 best practices for personal development, and SAVERS is his acronym: silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, scribing. E is for exercise. And so what I tend to do is I exercise in the morning before work. So I work fully remotely from work. That's actually what brought me back to New Jersey after living in the DC area for 11 years. I just moved back 9 months ago. And time is definitely a challenge when you live at home with your family, with elderly parents who need, lots of different things throughout the day and in the evening. And I'm finding that if I don't work out in the morning, I have lost my day, and I've lost my evening, and the odds are I'm not going to be able to exercise. Most of the time, I try to work out in the afternoon after work. I was just listening to this time management CLE through the DC bar yesterday, and they talked about how it's a good idea to off ramp, so to speak, use that would-be commuting time for those who work fully remotely, and just go for a walk after work in order to make that transition from working to your non-work time. And so I both incorporate morning routine and exercise in the morning, as well as going for walks in the afternoon, evening, depending on the weather. And sometimes I get lucky, like today, and my sister offers to say, hey, let's go to the gym together. And so going to the gym in the evenings is sometimes possible, maybe weekends. I find time in the most creative ways I can think of. For me, because of my chronic pain, I do Pilates exercises, which actually is identical to the physical therapy exercises my physical therapist had prescribed, a few years ago. It's verbatim identical. And so I just do some of these stretches in the morning before work.
Thank you so much. It seems like I hope that you feel better for the rest of your day. but it seems like part of the time management is not being discouraged by the plans you made about when you can exercise, if circumstances, including chronic health issues, come up, and then having a bit more grace about that, right? Not feeling like, okay, well, there goes that week. There's no point in me doing the rest of the exercise, which I hear a lot of people saying if they feel like they can't keep up with the plan they had, it becomes discouraging. What about you, Matt, in terms of things that you can relate in terms of what Benita was saying or your time management tips?
Sure. I wanted to pick up on something that Benita was saying about try to do things really, try to be creative about how you use your time effectively. At least for me, I like being outside. I like exercising outside. So I mentioned before that, I run, but I also like biking, hiking, stuff like that. So, on a nice sunny afternoon with friends, that's something that either actually I just got a text message today, just now, invited me to go out on a bike ride, but I already have plans. I'm here at this webinar. But so I like doing that because I kind of incorporate physical exercise into my life. So it's something that I don't I just like doing it, and it's also a social thing. So that's one thing that Benita had mentioned that I thought of. Another thing is, if you don't have a lot of time, there's small micro adjustments you can make to your day that perhaps it doesn't feel like a lot, but it adds up over time. For example, if you're going to work at an office, you can park in the far corner of the parking lot, so you got to walk more steps into your building and out. If there's stairs at the office, instead of take the elevator, take the stairs. Or you can go for a walk, or you can do some stretching on your lunch break. But on a bigger level, what I try to do is I just thought about this today, people will make time for the stuff that's important for them. So I would say put yourself first and start with a goal. Like, what is it you're trying to do? And you don't need to look way far in advance. Like, what do you want to do today? What do you want to do this week? Start with that and go from there. I want to walk 10,000 steps a day. I want to walk for an hour a day, 3 days a week, whatever. Start from there and go from there. I think that the difference between doing something 10 minutes a day and doing something 0 minutes a day, that difference is infinite, and it all adds up.
Absolutely. I completely agree with the points you're making, especially about this piece about things that we think we don't have time for. All of a sudden, if their importance level increases, then it's easier to make time for it, which is why I wanted to start with, let's talk about why this is really important. One, physical well-being and physical activity being a really big part of it, because it's obviously connected with every other aspect of physical well-being, is one of the 6 domains of global well-being. So if you have better physical well-being, then it affects your emotional well-being. It affects your social well-being in certain situations, whether it's you get physical activity in a social way, like Matthew's running club, or a Pilates class that you are connecting with people, or even as simple as people you see on your daily walk. When I can say that one of the ways that I sort of trick myself into getting more physical activity than I have gotten until towards the end of the day, by thinking, well, my dog deserves a walk, right? So I'm kind of like making that the importance, as opposed to like, I need to take a walk, because I know that if I thought about it like that, it's a little less likely. But if I feel like, well, he deserves a walk, he needs a walk. And one of my favorite things is you actually see sort of the same people, same dogs on your walk if you go out more or less the same time. And it's actually an opportunity to socialize, which is more than what I would have spending the whole day, definitely at least socializing behind screens, right? So there are very creative ways that we can bring this into our lives, and very unexpected benefits that it further brings into our life, right? Which is a great segue into the motivation piece. So this time I'll start with you, Matt. So in terms of the motivation, you mentioned that you started at a place where you weren't thinking, well, I am like so fit that I'm going to increase my activity levels, that I'm going to now all of a sudden run a marathon. I don't know about others that have participated, but for me, like the idea of running a marathon seems like, only people who are to begin with very fit and exercising regularly, it almost feels like it's their next level goal. It's kind of a goal to set up to push your limits beyond a very active, physically fit state. But your story tells me you didn't even set out to run a marathon. You just, how did you motivate yourself, given the fact that you didn't begin with a fitness level or the habit in place?
No, I mean, honestly, for me, like the motivation was that had started off my legal career as a law clerk, and um, I had sleep apnea, and it was like so bad that I was like falling asleep at work, and it I was thinking to myself like, geez, like I'm so unhealthy. I'm kind of messing up at work. This is not a great way to start off your legal career. So, I mean, that was kind of just, I guess, like the red flag or like whatever to kind of. So I got treated for sleep apnea. Then I started to lose weight. Had I not, this kind of goes into dealing with chronic conditions. I'm kind of like merging categories here a little bit. But getting treated for sleep apnea, that laid the groundwork for me to be more physically active and lose weight. So yeah, the plan was not running wasn't even the plan. That came later. That came a few years after I lost like 80 pounds. Um, I would say I'm trying to aim this towards people that perhaps they're not very physically active, that people that are quote unquote on the proverbial couch. I would say think of how much better you're going to look and feel if you come up with a plan and stick with it. I'm kind of I guess, goal oriented person, and today's presentation is designed. I mean, our target audience is attorneys, right? And if you spent all the time and effort to go to law school, you're probably a fairly motivated person. And this kind of ties into like my story. I think that good decisions and small victories beget bigger, better, good decisions and bigger victories. And if you look at it the other way in reverse order, you don't get to have big wins if you don't nail down like the small steps. So like being consistent, eating oatmeal instead of a bagel, parking the far corner of your parking lot at work to get in like a couple extra 100 steps. In terms of motivation, I also try to do something today that's going to keep me motivated to follow through tomorrow and something you want to do. So I want to wake up early and go to the gym before work tomorrow. Okay. Pack up your gym bag and leave it at the foot of your bed. Leave it at the door. So it's like, you like mentally, I would say that you're going to disappoint. Last night's Matt is going to get disappointed if today's Matt doesn't follow through on something that like yesterday's Matt made a sacrifice, to set you up for success today. It's also, make your lunches ahead of time. Like if you eat fast food tomorrow, like yesterday's Matt is going to be disappointed because yesterday's Matt took the time and effort to make you like a nice healthy salad for lunch today. And I would also say have resources around you that enable you to make healthy decisions. I try to keep a few granola bars and bottled water in my car. So if I'm feeling hungry, I'm like driving by McDonald's. It's like, not today, Satan. I have granola bars and water in the car. So that's how I try to stay motivated.
Those are excellent points, because I also hear from a lot of people that something like they didn't eat nutritionally or properly during the day, and they had plans to, let's say, join a friend for a leisurely after work walk. then the idea of, but I'm starving and I really don't feel like I have the energy, certainly the motivation goes down. And that's just the extra step that might tip the scales off against you, where you can say, well, forget it, maybe tomorrow, right? And then there goes your plan for socializing, plan for exercising, plan for keeping your own promise to yourself, right? So those are really valuable points. What about you, Benita, in terms of the when I say fitness level, it also involves things like, you know, someone might say, you know, I really think yoga would be great for me or Pilates would be good for me, but I've like never done it. So, you know, uh, how did you in your life deal with trying these new things and then discovering this is exactly like physical therapy, what they would have recommended? How have you planned um, the ways to bring exercise into your life in that way?
Sure. So first, let me just say that what Matt brought up were really great points. I would say that motivation is twofold. There's extrinsic motivation and then there's intrinsic motivation. So for example, if you have fitness trackers, I know I have my Apple Watch, that thing has given me an insane amount of motivation because it has preset goals for movement, right? For movement, for exercise, for calories burned. And so that alone gives me motivation. I want to close those 3 rings every single day, or at least as many days as possible. So that alone is just something. On a personal level, for me, I remember in 2016, so I was diagnosed in 2016 initially. A few months later is when my shoulder tendinosis developed. It was an adverse reaction to an antibiotic that we now know is contraindicated for all of us with connective tissue disorders. We didn't know, we know now. It is what it is. Back then, I could not even raise my arm. I literally could not raise my left arm for like a year. Nutrition, cooking, that went out the door, you know, out the window. I ended up just eating steamable vegetables that were microwavable because that was the only way that I could think of to eat healthy and not have to cook because I physically could not do that. A year later, through physical therapy, I was very fortunate that I was able to start walking more again. And that brought a lot of joy for me because I'm a walker. It's kind of funny because I was born premature, developmental delays, and one of them was walking. I walked very late, yet I'm a walker. I come from a family of walkers. My grandfather was a walker. My family and I would always go for walks. As a child, I was, you know, a loner. I was definitely bullied for various different things. And I would go for walks. I remember in high school and college in particular, I would go for walks right before school started. And it would be my reflection time to just look back and think about what worked, what didn't, what do I want to be different in the following year, and so on and so forth. So I know Gen Z and younger millennials out there think that they've invented a new trend. I know I've been hearing about it a lot with TikTok and so on and so forth, of mindful walking. I hate to break the bad news, but it's not a new thing. But it is something that I think a lot of us have, even as adults, we've forgotten how to just go for walks without technology. Because a lot of people, when they go for walks, you know, they're injuring their necks. They may not be aware of it and may not be thinking like it, but, you know, their heads are down, they're scrolling on their phone, they are listening to podcasts or listening to music, whatever, and they're not actually just being present. As far as actually getting motivated to exercise and so on and so forth, the real motivation came for me in 2016 when I was diagnosed. I still remember that day. I remember seeing so much depressing information on social media about the statistics, about the likelihood of becoming, you know, disabled and losing my mobility and so on and so forth. And I remember distinctly thinking, I'm not going down that road. I'm not going to fall into depression. And I went in the other direction of, I'm going to live life fully now while I still can, because I honestly don't know if and when things could change dramatically. For now, things are good, but 1/3 of patients with EDS get worse, 1/3 of patients stay about the same, 1/3 actually somehow get better. Right now, the prediction is for me to stay about the same, but I am also in my 40s and things do change, 40s and 50s, so on and so forth. So we don't know. Case in point, my back, which just started a couple of years ago, and it's just been really flaring me for God knows what reason. So my motivation is really that. It's knowing that there are other patients out there who have lost their mobility. I'm so grateful and lucky that I still have my mobility, and so I take full advantage of it. Maybe at a cost to me, such as today, where I think I might have overdone it with walking as well as doing all my PT exercises in the morning. I don't know. Um, I think that's where my motivation really comes from. And as far as trying different things, I can say safely that I grew up with a mom who does yoga all the time. Yoga is apparently not good if you have hypermobility. So instead, Pilates is actually what's recommended. And that's really what got me into Pilates. And for me, particularly, I moved back to New Jersey 9 months ago after living in the DC area for a decade plus. When I came back, I was looking for something that was familiar and things that I could do, just trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. And one of the first things I came across was Club Pilates a couple towns over. And I thought, oh my God, this is something familiar. It's something I've gone to back in Arlington. It's something that I know is good for me. So why not do that? And I'll get into why I chose that particularly when we talk about the barriers to fitness, because of course there are some barriers that I definitely have that I think most people, especially in a car dependent state like New Jersey, may not even consider.
Right. Thank you so much, Benita. I mean, just so much to think about, and what you said. A few things stood out for me before I ask Matt the next question. One is this piece about making things achievable, modifying exercise regimens to accommodate your health conditions, and in some ways aligning your goals accordingly, right? Like, so if my shoulder is giving me trouble, well, my shoulder's not gonna prevent me from walking. So being able to like shift in that direction. And in preparation for this talk, one of the things that Matthew and I had discussed was how running is also a place of reflection for you. So, when Benita said the mindful walking, can you say a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I thought about this as Benita was talking about it. Walking or exercise, it's a good opportunity to unplug, and in terms of mindfulness, to unplug from electronics or email or social media or whatever you have going on. And it's a good opportunity to just be mindful, be present. And people that I've gone to, I know a little bit about mindfulness, and they talk about having like a attitude of gratitude, that be thankful that you're healthy enough to be able to go out and exercise. Be thankful enough that the rain held off. Be thankful enough that I'm going for a run and I saw a deer in the woods, or I saw like a nice sunrise, and just you come back feeling like, I don't think I've ever gone on a run and never like regretted it. I mean, maybe I'm like kind of like grumpy that I don't feel so great, but I still always feel grateful and glad that I had done it.
Right. Thank you so much, because I felt like that was such a good connection to what Benita said about like that time for reflection. So we've already covered how physical activity could be a great pairing for finding socialization opportunities. Now we've talked about how it can be a place for you to take time to reflect on just how you're feeling and checking in with yourself, which I know for sure is one of the most important well-being initiatives. So Benita did point out well, obviously, then there is the piece about, all of this is great, but what about the barriers? So, what are some of the barriers that the two of you have found? Maybe just to even talk about that before we move into like how you've resolved them, or how you didn't get demoralized when those barriers kind of set you back a little bit. Matthew, any thoughts?
Oh, sorry. So for me, like the biggest barrier was, being diagnosed with sleep apnea. Was having that, but it was that diagnosis, being treated for that. That's what enabled me to begin to be more physically active, but also just trying to. Honestly, I tend to do better with structure. So I would do more meal planning, try to plan what's on sale this week at the grocery store, what's my social schedule, and then try to meal prep ahead of time so that, it because this ties into time, right? Like if you don't, at least for me, if I don't plan ahead, it's easy for me to get distracted and bogged down with work or whatever. So it's like, oh, geez, like now I don't have any time and now I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. I'll go through this bag of chips, stay in my kitchen while I figure out what I'm going to make for dinner. You know what I mean? So, all of that, has helped me and those have been barriers in how I've gotten past some of those barriers to physical health.
So it seems like one of the barriers, and therefore one of the ways, one of the things to overcome, has been not having a structure that automatically allows for it, and then creating different aspects of your structure so that you could.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And part of, I mentioned that like I'm the kind of I try not to keep potato chips in the house because I can be one of those kinds of people that like will just go through them, for 5 or 10 minutes while I figure out what I'm going to make to eat. So in terms of planning ahead, I've been able to, talk with nutritionists and other friends, other people that I know that are healthier, have a healthy lifestyle, and I try to keep stuff in the house that is like building blocks of like for healthy meals. So quinoa, black beans, chickpeas, chicken, stuff like that. Because
Right.
that way it's like it just makes it just, and to the extent I have unhealthy things in the house, you don't keep that at eye level in the cabinet. You stick that. So like I have to get on a step stool and and I hide it in like the back of the cabinet. So it's
You
that
have
much.
to work for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously, the physical activity, requires energy expenditure. And there is a difference in terms of what kind of energy sources are used. And, whole foods and good things that truly fuel your muscles is one thing that, definitely does make physical activity better. Before turning to Benita about the barriers, I want to highlight one thing that Matt had mentioned, which is important, obviously, especially if you're dealing with certain health conditions and wanting to increase a level of physical activity. Consulting healthcare professionals about what's suitable. Like I would have no idea that yoga would be counterindicated for what you have, and so how did you learn about these things, Benita? What kind of strategies have you followed to learn more about it?
Sure. So I was actually very involved in our local support group in the DC area, and now I'm happy to see that we do have online support groups here in New Jersey as well. And so fellow patients are really one of the best sources of information. They're the ones that know who are the right providers or the best providers to go to, who are the providers to maybe avoid going to, not necessarily because they're bad in the traditional sense, but maybe because they're not as well informed. Maybe they aren't knowledgeable enough to give proper guidance, or maybe they just really are that bad. They're not willing to listen to patients, any number of things. We have, an organization that purportedly advocates for us. They actually provide conferences present conferences, I should say, every year. Ours is coming up in July. I actually was one of the speakers for that in 2018. And so there's been a lot of information there. I have a friend who actually founded a nonprofit organization, and she actually really encourages everyone to just move 5 minutes. So she has this 5 minutes a day type of concept. Just move 5 minutes a day. And that's definitely one way to go about it. I know in the EDS world, we actually have a saying, go slow, go low. So we're supposed to have slower movements, things like Tai Chi, low impact exercises. Again, social media can be good, it can be bad. This is one of the ways where it is good because you have a lot of people talking about these things, a lot of patients sharing their information. We actually have one particular Facebook group that I really like, EDS athletes. It's amazing. The community of patients have the same condition who are unwilling to let it stop them, us, from being able to maintain fitness and fitness goals. Some incredible athletes out there with EDS. I've actually met one professional Paralympic athlete. That was really interesting to hear her story. So those are the ways that we really learn what is good and what is not. And the other thing, of course, is listening to your own body. You know, often patients will just not push themselves. They'll be in pain and they'll say no. Clearly, I'm on the opposite side where I do push myself a little too much sometimes, today being a good example, but it really does come down to listening to your own body at times. And sometimes you just have to pull back and say, no, I can't. Other times you can say, you know, yeah, I could push forward a little bit and then just accept the consequences that will be coming your way. Sometimes you can push yourself a little bit. And then every day is, you know, different. I often say with EDS in particular, it's unpredictable pain, and it is not just living day to day or week to week or month to month, but or even hour to hour. But quite frankly, in my experience, it's really minute by minute. 1 minute in pain, next minute fine. It's just very, very unpredictable.
And certainly provides many challenges to live with, especially if I know that someone defines themselves as someone who can't do things because, and it could be chronic illness or any other reason, because of age, because of fitness level, then it makes it that much harder to actually ever take that first step. So in a way, you're connecting to what Matt said in the beginning. Like sometimes it's really more about what can I do today for myself? Before we move on to the last portion of our discussion around, so what are the bigger picture gains beyond physical activity levels increasing? How has it, changed your well-being overall? Any other barriers that you feel might be holding people back that you want to share strategies about here? Either one of you had any thoughts? I welcome that.
I certainly do. As you know, one of my greatest challenges, and the reason that I actually left New Jersey, 12 years ago, was EDS has impacted my vision and has led to poor depth perception, which means while I now actually do qualify to drive, when I was 17, I actually did not. It's not exactly the safest thing for me to do. And so the biggest hurdle and challenge for me coming back to New Jersey is the fact that everything here is not really walkable. Everything here is really something where you need to drive. Coming from Arlington, Virginia, which was one of the most walkable areas that I can think of, and proudly, it was the fittest city in America for 4 or 5 years because we had a lot of county trails and parks for such a tiny county. That's really been a really challenging thing for me. We have the community center in my town. I am a member of it. But how often do I really go? Very, very rarely. Why? While I know a lot of people think, oh, well, you can just take Uber or Lyft to go here or there, I'm going to be generous and say 70 to 80% of New Jerseyans probably don't use Uber on a regular daily basis. I would say it's probably more closer to 80 to 90%. I'm trying to be a little charitable here. So most people don't really understand that it's actually much more expensive than it would seem because there's something called surge pricing. So for example, for me to go to the gym just once a week would end up costing me $120 for the month just going to the gym because it's about $30 round trip. In DC, I paid $88 for unlimited metro. So to wrap my head around that has just been really, really challenging. What's my solution? I mentioned Club Pilates, a couple of towns over. Take the bus. I can take the bus. I have taken the bus. The challenge there is, while it's definitely more affordable, it doesn't run very often, and oftentimes drivers are not on time. In fact, they can completely be very delayed and causing me to miss class. I've actually created a Saturday morning routine with my Pilates classes where I literally will go to class. I'll get coffee and or hot chocolate or whatever with some of my classmates. I'll go and take another bus to the local mall. Funny quick story about that. We talked about social aspects of physical activity a few weeks ago. I actually went to my local mall. A lot of people walk around there in the mornings. I ran into our former retired mailman of all people. He recognized me instantly. Bonus points, he knew which twin I was. He said that he'd seen me in town. I had also. I didn't put two and two together that it was him immediately, but when he said his name, I knew right away who he was. And we not only hugged each other, he abandoned his group of friends that he was with, and he and I spent a half hour walking around the mall. And I can't tell you just how happy that made me. That was just one of the most insanely small town type of things to do and experience. And it was just phenomenal to do that. And what I realized at that moment was, you know, I may not be able to go on the walking trail or the walking track around our community center, but what I can do is I can take the bus and walk around the mall in the morning. And then before I go to Barnes and Noble and do whatever else, that is definitely something that I can do. I'm very fortunate that where I live, we have the Middlesex County Greenway in my neighborhood. So I can look around and just now, especially now that the weather is getting better and warmer, walk on the trail over there. It's really comes down to a mindset of kind of reframing things and figuring out ways around it. So yes, it's frustrating that I no longer have a gym in my building because I live at home with my parents. Yes, it's frustrating that I can't go to the gym very often unless my sister's kind-hearted enough to, take me with her, or unless I'm willing to say, fine, I will just eat the Uber or Lyft, money and just end up paying for that. It's just really hard to wrap around my head still 9 months later. But these are the things that I can do. I can take the bus and I can go to the mall and I can walk around the mall. Finding, it really comes down to finding ways around these different challenges.
It goes back to that creativity, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I often
Mhm.
say that patients are the ones that have the creative problem-solving skills. I will say that. So that's what it comes down to. And finding small movements you can do. And one other thing I would add is chores. We've talked a little bit about chores earlier. I often say that, especially with chronic pain, we have to reframe how we do things. And we might not be able to go to the gym as much as we want to. We might not be able to work out the way other people can work out. But you know what? Chores can be exercise. So for example, I was vacuuming yesterday and I kept thinking, wow, I wonder if my watch is actually tracking this. Sure enough, it did. As long as my arms are swinging and moving, apparently it will pick it up as movement and it counts. So you have to look at different chores and how that could actually be exercise. Sorry to interrupt you.
Right. Actually, there is an interesting research that has shown that, I'll just summarize it very quickly. They went to a bunch of hotel housekeeping attendants and ask them, how physically active are you? And when they reframed all of the work as physical activity, their actual expenditure has increased. Well, and that's my activity partner barking, sorry. If you can give me 1 minute, I'm sorry. So since I mentioned him as my activity partner, I think he decided to remind me. I have been sitting in one spot for a long time. So sorry about the disruption. And speaking of these gauges and meters, one of the things that I find really helpful is you haven't moved in a long time warning. So I just wanted to, in realizing that we're almost at time, I want to ask you both, what have you seen physical activity increase do for your overall well-being, and especially in terms of like your professional functioning, your peace of mind? I think that would be the best way to end this meeting.
Do you want me to go first? Sure. Okay. For me, I definitely feel more relaxed, more like confident and relaxed. I mean, I know that when I work out, I mean, sometimes I run after work, sometimes I run or exercise at the beginning of the day. I definitely feel like more relaxed, like I have a better, like if there was something stuck in my head that is irritating me at work or personally, like whatever, in the course of running or walking or whatever, I'm like, you know what, we'll deal with this, or there's really nothing more. Like I deal with it like emotionally or mentally, and then I don't dwell on it, and I just kind of go on about my day. So that's how I find physical exercise helpful. That's the difference that I know. But I definitely feel also like more like confident, like more in control. It's like, I didn't plan on running a marathon. I completed that. What else can I do? So those are some of the what I've noticed after being more physically active.
And those are just amazing points. What about you, Benita?
I personally feel calmer after I walk. I know for me, when I bike away the stress, recumbent biking, because that's one of the low impact things I can do, I have biked away miles and just bike away, and the stress just is alleviated from just doing that. So for me, I just feel calmer. I feel like I can handle things more, both work and personal stuff. And especially with work, I feel like I can certainly focus more. For example, today, I've definitely been way more focused until pain kicked in and distracted me. But before that, wow, I just felt like I was so much more attentive, more focused, had more energy, all of those types of things. And I feel like it's a great way to like step away and even problem solve, because if you're just away from the screen, away from the distractions, and you're just working out in any shape, way, or form, even from cleaning, because that's actually can be very meditative as well. It's really an opportunity to kind of clear your head, and you can actually problem solve, and you can come back to your desk or whatever, and like, okay, you can just generate solutions and just have a different perspective on whatever it is that you were struggling with.
Absolutely. So I hope that this talk will help encourage everyone to celebrate their own unique physical well-being journeys and support your peers. I really want to thank you so much for participating and the great tips that you provided.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We have great talks for the rest of the week. I hope that the two of you are able to attend, and hopefully the attendees for this meeting will also join the others every day from 12 to 1 for this week. Join in to tune in to different aspects of well-being. Thank you for joining this one.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. And if you want any more information about these and future well-being week webinars, please go to www.njlap.org/WBW. And thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Noreen.
You're welcome.